All right, let's get started. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Marin Local Agency Formation Commission on August 8th, 2019. Candace, would you please call the roll?
There it is.
Okay. Sashi McEntee.
Here.
Craig K. Murray.
Here.
Sloan Bailey is absent, and so is Matt Brown. Lou Caius.
Here.
Damon Conley.
Here.
Dennis Rodoni is absent. Alternate Judy Arnold. Here. Larry Loader.
Here.
Alternates Todd Moody.
Here.
Roll has been taken, and we have quorum.
Thank you very much, Candace. We'll now move on to agenda review. I think we might want to, since the item 9 representatives are here, we might want to move that one up. Thank you very much. Since the representatives for item 9 are here, we might want to move that up above the public hearing for item 6, unless anybody has any objections. I don't know if anyone else wants to move anything else on the agenda. No, any objection to moving item 9 up above the MSR so they can get going? No? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Move it. Second.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. And now we'll move to public open time. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the commission on any matter not on the current agenda. All statements that require a response will be referred to staff for reply in writing or will be placed on the commission's agenda for consideration at a later meeting. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Is there anybody who'd like to comment in public open time? Please go ahead and go up to the mic.
And then we have Sonali, and I'm gonna go ahead and speak just about the things that
Okay.
so we were trying to.
Or maybe I can stay here, or I can get.
We need you at the mic for recording purposes.
Oh, okay, well, then I have to.
Can we, do you think we can take the mic out and bring it to her? Yeah. Why don't you go ahead?
My name is Nani Boero, and I used to be the president of the Santa Lucia Neighborhood Association. Now I'm in charge of the medians, and we are working on them. And I have the medians from in front of the convalescent home up to La Pesada. And I have a group and myself, we work the second Saturday of the month. The only thing the county supplies is the water. And when at one point I told Northbridge I couldn't.
You know what, is this regarding the San Rafael Municipal Service Review? Is this, okay, so that'll be later in the agenda. So this is just for some things that are not on the agenda, anything else. So, no problem. Anybody else have anything that's not on the agenda? Stephen, you want to, once we get the microphone going?
There you go. Good job. Oh. They won't hear it in the room, so.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I just have some brief comments. I'll be making more comments later. I just wanted to talk about...
Will you just state your name, Stephen?
Oh, my name is Stephen Nessel. I'm from Marinwood, and thanks for giving me some time. Basically, this is my first time at a LAFCO meeting, and I want to just say how much I appreciate what this body does. In my city, I believe we started developing in 1955. We were incorporated in 1961, and there's a lot of potential for improvements as we've grown. So I guess I just want to set the stage here. I've got some pretty sharp comments on the operation of Marinwood, and I just want you to keep in mind, I believe in your mission, and I believe you can help the citizens of Marinwood. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else for public open time? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public open time, and we will move to the consent calendar. Would any commissioner like to pull an item from consent?
I have a couple of questions about item 3. Sorry. Well, I don't know if we need to pull it.
Sorry, I messed you up. Go
All
ahead.
right. I don't know if we need to pull it off the consent to ask a couple of questions, or do we leave it on?
Do you think they're brief, or do you think they'll end up?
One of them is brief, one of them may not be brief.
Then why don't we pull it
Can we
just
pull
in
it just to
case?
play it safe? Okay,
Yep.
then I'd like to pull number 3 off of consent.
Okay, great. Anybody else want to pull anything?
Item 1, just briefly, Connolly and Murray were not at that meeting, so it should be consistent on all the voting as absent.
Okay,
The way it works is the alternate was not here when the start of the meeting occurred, so the person who sits in the seat normally gets marked as absent until the alternate shows up. So it is correct in how it is listed in the minutes.
okay. Anybody from the audience want to pull anything from the consent calendar? Okay. None, do I have a motion to approve items 1, 2, 4, and 5, please?
I'll make a motion. This is item 1, 2, 4, and 5.
Moved by Commissioner Caius.
second.
Second by Commissioner Loder. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes, and then we will go to item 3, Jason.
Do we want to take item 3 after we've done all the items that the public is here for? Just because I don't think anyone's here for item 3 itself.
It sounds like it's going to be brief, why don't we just
Okay.
take them in order?
All right, then item 3 is the Personnel and Policy Committee did some updates to the policy handbook. There were things that we had discussed in the past that needed to be updated once we went through some processes. There are some updates around the public seat, how it gets appointed. There are some updates to the special districts election, and then just some other updates that needed to be done, one of which was one that we had meant to include in the original version, but it got lost in all of the shuffle of everything else that was getting changed around. So if people have questions on any of it, I'm happy to answer those questions.
Commissioner Caius, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, two items. First, in the election process, where you're now switching it to the Special District Selection Committee, is that a state mandated requirement, or is the process we've been using still acceptable?
The Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act does provide for the Special District Selection Committee to create the process, but they have not been able to do so. So I think we've taken the liberty to do so unless they do decide to take action.
So then we aren't, by regulation, allowed to continue. Keeps turning off on me.
I know.
We aren't then allowed by regulation to continue the election process we've been having, because frankly, there is some benefit in the way we've been doing it. Like in my case, I've gone out, I've met Steve, I went to the Marinwood Special District, and I've been to a lot of the special districts as part of the process that we're using now to get the districts to vote. And were that process to go away, and it was selected by a committee, that opportunity to interact with the various districts and the public would be diminished. And so if it's not an available option, then it's a moot point. But if it is an available option to continue with that process, I'd like for us to at least consider that.
Well, I think also if the
Right.
Special District Selection Committee does hold a meeting and approves a different process, so there is an opportunity to have input to that process,
Okay? Then maybe
And-
that's when we can handle it.
and maybe that's it.
Okay?
And they've yet to do so, which is why we've been adopting this procedure.
Okay? So that's my first question. My second question is more procedural. In the case of a tie, what is the tiebreaker, and how do you resolve a tiebreaker without going through a ranked choice vote?
We don't have a process set up in here to deal with a tiebreaker. So if you want to add something, we would need to do so.
But I would also add state government code. What we have in the way we amended it is to follow what state government code says should be followed in the process. State government code doesn't have a process for dealing with tiebreakers.
Okay, that seems like a little bit of an oversight, but if that's the case, I'll accept that.
Mala, if that were to come up, what would be your advice?
I don't know if we would request going, if we would do another ballot to change, see if anyone would change their vote. I mean, it may not result in a different process. So if, other than potentially doing some sort of flip of a coin, I don't know, you see that on occasion happen when there's precise, even in elections. So unless we call something out, we wouldn't have a process to deal with it other than potentially going back out, which may not create a different result. Unless you could get some of the people who didn't potentially vote to vote.
Okay, well, I just thought I'd raise it as a question. It doesn't like there's an answer for it right now, so I think we can proceed.
If it were to come up and we didn't have a process, what would we be then empowered to do?
We wouldn't have someone selected. So we would either go back out.
You just have to do it again.
Yeah, and see if there would be a change
Okay,
in the
so-
result.
So by de facto, the process is, if we get a tie, you have to do it again. Until you get somebody. Yep,
Okay.
all right. Okay, any other questions on the policy committee, the policy handbook updates, rather? Do you have a motion to approve the updates?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Okay, motion carries. All right, so then we are going to move on to item 9. And then we'll go back to the usual order. Jason?
Can you hit escape on the keyboard? Thank you. All right, so in front of you today is an application that's been sitting in front of LAFCO for quite a while that predates me being here. So I don't know exactly how far back it goes, but it's been here for a few years now. It's an application to turn, and if you follow the hand on the screen, to take this parcel that starts up here, goes down and follows all the way down this way. It's 400 Upper Toyon Road is the address. It is a detachment from the city of San Rafael and an annexation into the town of Ross. This has been sitting in front of the town and the city as they've been working for a tax exchange agreement. They now have a tax exchange agreement. We have that on file, so we can now move forward with this application. While I've been working on this application, it seems to be a pretty straightforward one. This side of the map, which is everything from this red line, if you follow this red line where the hand is going, is the city boundary between the city-town boundary. So you have someone who is right on the boundary. This side, all of these here are all in Ross. This side over here, which is actually, open space, is San Rafael. And then here's the parcel of land with the long private road that goes down here that's part of 400 Upper Toyon Road, but also gives access to all the city of Ross, or all the town of Ross addresses that are along the road along here. There's a few of them along there. So it's a pretty straightforward application. Staff doesn't have any objection to it. The one thing I will add is, while I was doing my research into this, I realized that there's this, right where the hand is, there's actually 3 different parcels. They're all owned by MMWD. If we take this one, which is 400 Upper Toyon Road, and switch it to Ross, you're gonna have a small little island of San Rafael sitting inside of Ross. So I reached out to MMWD and said, do you have any objections to us taking these 3 parcels, moving them into Ross? The only concerns that they raised 2 main concerns for us. One is they don't want to lose their tax exempt status for those parcels because they're government parcels, they don't have to pay property tax. And 2, they don't want to have to pay any application fees or have any costs associated with doing this. So what we have done is I talked with the applicant, and they said they would cover any costs associated with it. They already have the application in front of us. It's already been paid for. So by amending their application, no more applications are done. The only small thing that may have come up in this, and I'm still waiting for final results from them on this, is acreage size matters to the State Board of Equalization for what their fee is. So if it goes, I think right now they'll be fine. I think they're somewhere between 1 and 5 acres on this parcel. If they go above 5 acres, it actually increases how much they have to pay the State Board of Equalization for the transfer. It's not a lot of money, it's a very small amount, but there's still a slight increase. They're gonna cover whatever costs are associated with that, so there'll be no costs to the MMWD folks for doing this transfer. And the parcel tax thing is not an issue either, because there's 0 parcel tax now, there'll be 0 parcel tax after the transfer. So that doesn't change either. So MMWD's concerns were done. It was not included in the packet, but I do have an email with me today that shows MMW saying we are okay with this as long as those conditions are met, and I'm guaranteeing that those conditions are being met. And so the applicant still needs to turn into us a map and legal description that includes the MMWD parcels on it. Takes some time for them to go through to get the people that do those things to do it. We're anticipating getting something in early September, if I understand, early to mid-September. We should have something from them. So we're happy to, I want to get approvals today conditioned on us getting that map. That way we don't have to come back here again in the future to have a discussion about it. So those are my comments. The applicant or his representative is here, so is happy to answer any questions if you have them, and I'm happy to answer any as well.
Commissioner Murray?
So Jason, the MMWD parcels are actually processed as part of this application, one application.
Correct.
Any further questions from the commission? Okay, should we open the public hearing first or have the applicant speak first?
This one doesn't need a public hearing because it's a one parcel
Oh, I'm sorry.
item.
Got it. All right, so would the applicant like to speak?
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Thank you for having me. My name is Peter Sproul. I'm with Ruggiani Freitas here in Santa Fe, here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. DeBallman. I don't have any specific presentation or points to make. I'm here to happy to answer any questions you may have. It hasn't been my matter since the beginning, but I'm fairly up to speed and I'm familiar with the application. It certainly seems straightforward to me. I've contacted the City Attorney's Office, both San Rafael and the Town Attorney and Ross, just to clarify any potential changes to the tax sharing agreement. Everyone's comfortable with the changes, and I think Jason has presented it well, but again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or at least try to.
Any questions for the applicant from the commission? No? Okay. Seeing none, is there any public comment?
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Any further deliberation or motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we will, oops. Now we go back to the public hearing for the municipal service review presented by Plan West. Jason.
Sure. Sorry. So in front of you today is a draft copy, which has been out for about 60 days now, I believe. We have received quite a bit of good public comments so far. Today is technically the last day to receive public comment. Reality is if someone turns something in tomorrow, I'm not going to say no to it. But today is technically the last day for public comment, which coincides with the hearing. So those who maybe didn't want to write comments could come in today and do that. So the public is aware. We have these nice little speaker cards on the table over here. If you wish to speak, please fill this out. It is not a requirement, but we will be calling people first who have filled out one of these. And then anyone who hasn't filled out a card that wishes to speak will be able to do so after. So please turn in those cards to us. So after public comment is over, we can give those to the chair to call who has done public comment. And with that, one other thing, just so folks are aware, because I think there's been a little bit of confusion about how the comment period and how the drafts work, just so everyone's aware, what we have out now is a draft. We are not approving anything tonight. All we are doing tonight is listening to public comment and accepting it, giving our consultant who did the work a chance to present to the commission. The commission has a chance then to ask questions, after which the public who wishes to speak will be able to give their comments as well. And then when all that is done, what will occur is George and I will sit down with all of the comments and review them, determine which ones should be included in the document, which ones are maybe we don't agree with, and we'll have discussions with whoever gave us those comments. And then there are some items I've already noticed this in reviewing the public comments that are outside the scope of an MSR, and we will simply let folks know that those things are outside the scope and can't be included in the MSR itself. And then there are even one or two items that may be outside the scope of LAFCO not being able to handle it at all. So I'll have those discussions with individual members of the public or districts who presented information to us when the time comes, once we've gone through all those reviews from an internal perspective. In the future, we will then bring back all those comments and present them to you in a final draft, which would hopefully get approved, and it would just become final at that point. So any questions from the commissioners on this process before I hand it over to our consultant? Yes, this is a public hearing. So yes, we will be following public hearing rules today on this one.
Okay. Vice Chair Murray, I'm sorry.
Jason, so in the past, we've had like other organizations, they could provide comments after this draft is kind of in a final draft mode. So we have, if they want to make some clarifications or if they're not particularly in agreement with the methodology or some of the structure, is that still part of this process where they're or tonight in this process is the time for a comment? Is that?
This is the time for comments from them. This is not to say this will be the district's last time, because if we do make any changes to the district section, we will be taking it back to the district to show them and make sure that they're okay with what was done, and have discussions with them. So it's not like, one of the parts of this process that we wanted to make sure was very upfront with all the districts was they were a partner in this process, not the person who's simply sitting in the back of the room and waiting for us to turn something in and then arguing with us about what goes on. I know how stuff has kind of been occurred in the past. My goal was make them a partner in the process. They have reviewed this multiple times between when we first started and now. So they've had plenty of chance to give comments to the consultants. They now have a chance to give public comment. They're large documents, so there's always small, you'll see in the comments that they've written, there are small little things that they caught that they didn't catch before. So we'll make those changes. One thing I will add is in your packet, you have some public comment, things that we have arrived since we put out the packet. At your desk, you actually have another new packet that has even more comments in it. So you have anything that we received from 4 o'clock today, which hasn't been anything so far, to the end of public comment period. I will send out one final packet to all of you. So you will have all the comments that have been submitted to this application or to this MSR.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so is George going to do a presentation?
Yeah, so George, who is with Plan West Partners, who we hired to do this work, will take his keyboard, go up to the podium, and we'll go through the PowerPoint and then be able to answer any questions you have after it.
Okay. Go ahead, George. And George was brought on because at the time we didn't have an executive officer, and
We
Jason
technically
was
had
brought in.
zero staff when we brought him on
technically
board.
had zero staff at the time, and Plan West, for those of you who are unaware, is very experienced in the LAFCO world and putting together municipal service reviews, and we're happy to have George here representing Plan West.
Well, thank you, members of the commission, public. I really do appreciate the opportunity, both getting able to start out over a year now ago. We did get a call from Cal LAFCO about the staffing situation, and it's amazing how things work out. I had just met Jason like a month before, and he and I were looking at some opportunities to work together. So we had established a relationship, and then when we heard that there was an opportunity here with some of the staffing changes, we thought, okay, we are going to get to work together, and that was a real opportunity that I appreciated. And our firm has, by way of introduction, we've got 12 years of experience, both with municipal service reviews and with staffing, LAFCOs. And what we've been able to do is work with LAFCOs throughout Northern California. I think we've done work for 8 or 9, and both helping with municipal service reviews, which is, in my view, the most important thing that LAFCOs do, and just in terms of staffing. And that continues with, starting last month, the Trinity LAFCO executive officer retired, and we got another call from Cal LAFCO saying, could we help out there? And so now we're going to Weaverville every other month. So beautiful country if you've never been up there. So with that, what I'd like to do is just a couple of slides for introduction. And because what I heard, and of course communicating with Jason, is that not all of you have had the opportunity to go through a municipal service review. And so I want to take full advantage of this opportunity to talk about these as an important planning tool, an important regular informational tool. They're the things we never cease to amaze what we learn in doing these. So my first couple of slides are just overview, LAFCO's role and function, municipal service review requirements, and then scope and timeline of what we're working on right now here, starting with this draft. And then I'll spend a few more minutes with looking at the agencies and the determinations that are in this draft. And I do want to emphasize that this is a draft, and this is a very customary process, and it's a proven one where we will put a document out, and we will encourage public, the agencies, everybody who has an interest to really dig into it. And we learn a lot. We get a good broad range of comments. And so just as Jason was explaining to you in the introduction, our firm is committed to working with those agencies. We had direct conversations with City of San Rafael, Marinwood CSD, and all of the CSAs that the county manages in putting this together. And my expectation is that Jason and I will continue to have conversations on how we're going to handle their draft comments, acknowledge the effort that they made, not only providing us information, but getting us comments on the draft so that we can bring back a final. Our highest objective is to bring back for this commission's consideration a final document that really reflects what's going on in these agencies. So that's when we accomplish that, hopefully in October. So that's our objective. So LAFCO is a regulatory agency, and it's one of its greatest values is impartial, third party, looks at incorporations, disincorporations, formations, dissolutions, annexations, detachments. The legislature wanted LAFCOs to be so impartial and so independent that there's very unique language in the legislation that says that even if you were a San Rafael City Council member sitting on LAFCO and San Rafael had an annexation or some other action that came before LAFCO that you had voted on as a council member or a CSD member, you can vote on it. You're not conflicted out. And that's because the legislature in their setting this up really wanted this to be a true impartial body. You take your city hat off, you take your special district hat off, you take your board of supervisors hat off when you come into the room, and you are all in as a LAFCO member. So I think it's, I've seen it work very well, and so that's an important part of the regulatory function. Out-of-agency service agreements, sometimes there's a need to get a service established quickly for health and safety reasons, or maybe because it's in the sphere and it's on its way to annexation. So this commission has the opportunity to work quickly on those kind of agreements, especially with health and safety issues. And then activation of latent powers. A lot of times a service district will set up with a couple of powers, and then on down the road, they'll grow, and the need for an additional power, maybe parks and recreation, maybe another municipal service. So they can petition to your commission, they can get that latent power activated, and they can provide that service. And again, it's all about just having an open process for all these regulatory actions. You're a planning agency also, while you don't have land use authority, working on growth, preservation, service delivery issues, the municipal service review, and spheres of influence. We're not covering spheres of influence with this particular document, but I expect that will come down the road and will be part of the consideration. But the sphere is informed by the municipal service review. You're taking a very important step in looking at this and getting this reviewed tonight and then brought back for action later this year. What goes into the municipal service review, the key is a focus on service delivery, and in looking at the regional MSR, which is very much the trend. It's rare now for individual MSRs for a specific agency to be done because there's just so much interrelationship and there's so much sharing of talent and services that having a regional approach, we learned a lot about, both coordinated services and then some overlaps and how those overlaps were being handled. So the considerations are population and growth. These are actually the determinations. Disadvantaged unincorporated communities where they exist. The legislation says that a body can't annex an area that is adjacent to a disadvantaged unincorporated community without considering their service needs. And so that's an important consideration that we look at. Unincorporated islands, there's quite a few unincorporated islands. And just acknowledging them, talking about them, how are they getting services within an incorporated area? It's a valuable discussion that we like to put into these municipal service reviews. Climate change, I was thrilled to see the city of San Rafael just May bringing their climate action plan 2030, excuse me. In May, the San Rafael City Council adopted that climate change action plan. In my county, we're working on a multi-agency climate change action plan. I personally, from a planning perspective, from a professional perspective, I think it's one of the most important things we need to be doing in terms of looking at how we provide services and just how we're reducing carbon footprint. And so I really applaud City of San Rafael for that, and I think others will be following suit. Regional planning and shared services round out the list. And the study outcomes, we're looking at guiding subsequent sphere of influence updates, not part of what we're considering tonight, but it's coming, it'll be coming back. Informing future boundary changes. One of the most valuable features of an MSR is when those boundary changes come, with a current MSR, you can look at the capacity and the capabilities of the service provider, and you can make a much more informed decision. Can they really serve that area that, if it is annexation, if an unincorporated island is to be brought into the incorporated limits, you know, what is the reality of bringing service to that previously unserved area or served by another agency? So we pay particular attention to the services in and around those particular areas. And then reorganizations, as appropriate, consolidations and mergers. Fire districts across Northern California are looking at or moving forward with consolidations. Other districts too, but primarily fire districts. I'm working on one right now up north of us, and this is another example of where LAFCO, the two districts, they want to form, but they've got turf, they've got identity issues, and we come in as an independent party and say, you can have all that and a consolidated district that is more efficient, one set of books, one board of directors, one chief, and when they start setting aside the turf issues, it's amazing how they start to work together. It's really pretty gratifying. Okay, so the scope and timeline for this, we got going back in January. Agency profiles, that was where we started talking to all the different agencies. We did service evaluations in July and got this draft out that you have in front of you here tonight for task 4. And task 5 is for a future meeting. So now let's talk about San Rafael. It's the region includes the county's north central area, and I just for the record, it's the city, it's Marinwood CSD, and it's 6 county service areas: Galenas Creek, Northbridge, Upper Lucas Valley, Las Colinas, and San Rafael unincorporated area. 1, 2, and then Tierra Linda, which is kind of inactive. 6.5? I don't know, something like that. So anyway, it's a good. What I saw was that you have the main incorporated area that is really providing the full range of services that you have, you would expect of a municipality. You have Marinwood CSD, which is fire protection, parks and rec, open space, street lighting, and then the more focused services of the CSAs, the county service area, everything from channel maintenance, parkway, median, strip landscaping, fire protection, parks and recreation, fire protection. And one of the most impressive things I've seen is, in putting this together, is just how important open space is to this community, and how you've preserved open space and how you're managing that open space. I was just happy to see it's just such a important part of a community, of a region, really. Okay, I just kind of gave this one away, but here the CSAs are. Here's the map, and as you can see, San Rafael is the big dog in this region, but you've got the islands, and then the CSAs are kind of tucked around to the north, and they're kind of along San Pablo Bay, and then we've got the islands inside more to the south. Regional outcomes. This is what drives the determinations, is potential reorganization of fire districts. Again, there's ways to do this. There's ways to reorganize that doesn't leave people out. There's ways of reorganizing that preserves function and utility and value, and the roles of key people within that are providing that service. There's limited funding for parks and recreation. One of the commenters took issue with our comment about limited lack of funding, and I appreciate that. I still think it's the case, and my job is to put it out there and to get people to talk about it and to get people to refute if they want, and ultimately I think we'll come to a better assessment of funding for not only for parks and recreation, but identify funding needs. When I was sitting with the 2 fire districts just last week talking about consolidation, I told them, okay, you got to consider some other forms of revenue. They're limping along on property tax and a few other marginal sources, and I informed them that as part of this consolidation, we wanted to really look at some other forms of revenue that they could consider, that we could show them how to put in place. Prop 218 is a significant piece of legislation and a high bar, but it can be reached. People will pay for services when they know that the funding will be earmarked for that purpose. So we've had some really good success with some of the revenue assessments, parcel-based assessments, when people see, okay, every nickel that comes off of my assessment goes to that particular function and goes to that particular agency. It's a very compelling way to increase revenues. And limited funding for roads and street lighting, again, additional funding sources. And then the final one here is just dredging services being right on the bay. There's 2 issues going on, sedimentation and sea level rise. And those low-lying areas are going to be affected. I live on Humboldt Bay, and we're really being affected by sea level rise. And it's taking some really creative thinking. We're looking at things like living shorelines and some, the diking doesn't work really unless you have a lot of money. So there's other ways to address sea level rise, and there's some really creative thinking that's coming out about how to preserve the lands that we have for the uses that we like and want to continue there, and addressing this this issue, which is happening and is getting it's pretty well. We know where the inundation areas are now. We can start our planning right away. It's a slow rise, but it's a pervasive rise. And so we want to make sure that we're doing the things now that will protect for that in the long term. So those are the things that I wanted to cover tonight, but I want to read the list of the comments that I've received so far, just to acknowledge the people that have taken the time to do it. Starting off with back in June, Susan Andrade-Wax. I had the opportunity to talk with Susan. She's recently come in as Community Services Director for the City of San Rafael. Turns out we're both SDSU alumni, and so we have that in common. Later that month, Liz Lewis, we got a comment from CSA 18 community member about the fire districts. Mr. Nestler commented. For CSA 6, we had multiple conversations with Hannah Lee and Roger Leventhal, got their comments on the profile, and then they found a few other things. And this is pretty typical. We'll put the draft out, as Jason was explaining. They'll look at it, but then when they see it in this broader context, they'll realize, okay, well, there are a couple of the things that we didn't catch or that I missed. I mean, sometimes I write down as best as I can, but sometimes there are things that get lost in translation, and that's why this review process is so important. Greenbelt Alliance has commented. Might be a little beyond your authority, but still some very interesting comments about open space. The Los Ranchitos Improvement Association commented. Gina Hagan, Ellen Stein, and CSA board member 18. Eric Dreikason wrote us 2 letters, which we're carefully reviewing. Mr. Schultz, city manager of San Rafael, gave us a good set of comments. Jaron found some typos, and he's brought those to our attention. Thank you, Jaron. And then just got today Santa Venita resident, Phoenicia resident, Francis Nunes. So I wanted to read these so everybody knows that I'm really, when people comment on our work, I'm happy. And I'm looking forward to working with Jason and the agencies and the public to make sure that the document that comes back to you is one that you gets your full support and that serves you well moving into the future. Those are the things I wanted to say.
Okay, are there any questions from the commission? I just had a couple questions, and then later I have just a few small comments. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much. I think you guys did a really great job, and one of our goals here was to have this MSR be sort of a template for our future MSRs. In the past, our MSRs have been very voluminous and perhaps with not so much utility, and we're hoping for them to be a little crisper and more useful. And I think that that you've made a great start there. Did you? There's a bunch of mention of streetlights and no comment about Marin General Services. Is it Authority? MGSA, which manages all the streetlights in Marin, and I'm not sure whether some of these agencies do their own streetlights and don't go through MGSA, but if you could include MGSA, I'm wondering if you knew about that one. And then wondering, is CSA number 19, is that a single purpose district? It was sort of not totally clear.
CSA 19 is fire protection.
Okay, just fire protection.
That's all we saw in.
And they contract that out to San Rafael.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, those are all my small questions. All right, so then we will open the public hearing. Did everybody who wants to speak fill out one of these? Okay. We'll open the public hearing, and we will start with Terry Shore of the Greenbelt Alliance.
Hi, good evening. Chair McKenty, LAFCO Commissioner, staff, and members of the public. Hi, everyone. My name is Terry Shore. I'm the Regional Director for the North Bay for Greenbelt Alliance. I'm based up in Santa Rosa. Greenbelt Alliance is a regional organization based in San Francisco. We cover the 9 Bay Area counties, and our main focus is to protect the greenbelts and also encourage the right development in the right places. We do work with LAFCOs around the region on various policies because the role of LAFCO in each county is very important. While we recognize you're not a land use policy, a lot of your decisions are closely aligned with the land use policies of the various cities and counties where you operate. So with that in mind, I've made some comments that are fairly broad, but I hope you will consider as part of the MSR and perhaps as part of your policymaking for Marin LAFCO and the county. So Greenbelt Alliance, and I did send in a letter, so I'll just read part of it. Greenbelt Alliance urges Marin LAFCO to consider adding recommendations on greenbelt protections and community separator designations to the draft San Rafael Regional Municipal Services Review. We urge you to recommend that LAFCO, the County of Marin, Marin County Open Space District, and relevant special districts work together to identify and designate appropriate lands within the review area as priority greenbelts and community separators, and to protect them from urban development. Greenbelt Alliance believes that the county and city interagency jurisdictional coordination is imperative for the implementation of the Marin County Open Space District Strategic Plan policies in the County of Marin. So specifically, Greenbelt Alliance urges you to recommend that the St. Vincent's and Silvera lands be prioritized for permanent open space protection, that the Upper Sun Valley undeveloped open space be added to open space and parklands, that the Los Ranchitos community be designated a community separator and realigned more closely with the county rather than inside the city's sphere of influence. Other lands that are rural and low density and that serve to separate communities in Marin County should also be so designated. And community separators should be defined based on existing policy, such as in Sonoma County, that prevents intensification of development over existing land use and zoning. So those are our general comments. There's more in our letter that I won't read. And I also wanted to just comment that I appreciate the new executive director, Jason Fried, for being very responsive to us, reaching out to him. And we will be meeting next week to talk about the Novato service, municipal service review. That came up a couple of years ago when we were working with the city of Novato to renew its urban growth boundary, and there are a few issues there, overlap between the city, UGB, LAFCO, the county, the sanitation district, the water district. So we look forward to making comments on that as well. Thank you.
Terry. All right, next we will have Layla Hill from Los Ranchitos Homeowners Association.
I too would like to thank the commission for this opportunity, and especially Jason Fried for working with us and being really open to a million questions and different ways of looking at things. I'd like to echo the comments from our friend and colleague at Greenbelt Alliance in favor of formally designated community separators, paying attention to open space and interagency preservation of open space, and designating Los Ranchitos as a community separator. Otherwise, I think our comments stand, and thank you very much for the opportunity to make them.
Hey, thank you very much, Layla. And Judy Schriebman.
Good evening. I'm also a resident of Los Ranchitos, and we've been working consistently with LAFCO. I don't know, our organization, the Los Ranchitos Improvement Association, has been working with LAFCO probably for the last 40 years, trying to, even though we can't talk about it, be removed from the sphere of influence of San Rafael and not be recognized as an island, but actually as a bordering with the open space belt. So I'd like to make sure it's in our letter, but just draw your attention to the maps that show that we have this border with the Terra Linda Sleepy Hollow Divide open space area. And that, in fact, makes us sort of substantially but not entirely surrounded by the city of San Rafael, even though those lands are San Rafael's jurisdiction. So our upper areas could not be built on, and we're mostly built out. So we would just like to have that, and thanks to the Greenbelt Alliance for saying that we should be a community separator, and we would like to remain in the county. And the sphere of influence definitions has changed over time, and I know we're not talking about that now, but that's one of the things driving our request. So I just want to draw your attention to our letter, the maps, and the history of what we're trying to bring to you. And thank you again for the MSR. That we thought that the language was pretty good. We have a couple of tweaks we'd like you to also possibly incorporate. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Judy. Next, we will have Rick Saville or Saville. Saville.
I appreciate Ms. Shore coming down. I did work with Greenbelt Alliance on Measure K, which was the community separator project in Sonoma County. I have about 35 years experience in Sonoma County between working cities and inner city county policies during the general plan, the Rohnert Park general plan, Cotati, mainly southern Sonoma County. Just a couple of technical things that I've found that, and as I mentioned to Jason too, they're a little bit difficult. Sonoma County is somewhat further ahead with open space policies and community separators, and something that I wouldn't say anything here that I wouldn't say in Sonoma County and have many times, either to LAFCO or the county of Sonoma. Here, we're facing a problem where if I take the city of San Rafael, the county of Marin, the open space district, everybody's compartmentalized. We'll take a terminology like community separator. Marin LAFCO has policies, and we went through a policy review. You have a statement or a sentence in there in a policy related to community separators. The county has that terminology. San Rafael may, but there's no unifying body. They're all compartmentalized. There's no way for these organizations to work in a unified way to make that strategic plan happen. And to add to the difficulty that I noticed in the chronology, the last city of San Rafael general plan was 2005. Was that, I think, 2005, 2006? The last county general plan was 2007, and both of those predated the 2008 open space district. That came after those last two general plans. So as we look ahead to updating those plans, this would be the time I would think that it's falling into place where we need to look at how that's going to come about or how it's going to be implemented. Because right now, I don't see how that's going to happen. It's too compartmentalized. So I'll leave it at that, folks. It's going to be a long evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. Okay. Nanny, I'm sorry, I can't read the
I haven't been involved.
Oh, just a moment. Let's just get let's get the microphone to you so that we can record it. Oh, sure.
Just to give context, I guess.
Okay, so Gina Hagens, and you two are together?
Yeah, we both reside in the neighborhood of Santa Venetia and had served on our CSA 18 advisory board together, as well as our neighborhood association. So I just thought maybe perhaps my comments might give more context for
okay.
Nani's.
So you're just switching order. Okay.
Yeah, if that's okay. So thank you so much, Chairperson, commissioners, everybody from Plan West. My name's Gina Hagen, and I'm the current chair with our CSA 18 advisory board. And I'm also vice chair with our Santa Venetia Neighborhood Association. So I submitted some comments related to things, I was initially focused on looking at the information regarding CSA 18, and then also CSA 9, since that's within our community. And one of the things that I just wanted to underscore is that there were a couple of different areas within both CSA 18 we're considering redetermining the spheres. You're considering redetermining the spheres of influence. But funding for some of the things that are happening related to CSA 9 was also an item that wasn't very clear. And Francis Nunez brought up a question about funding regarding our CSA 19. And my understanding has always been that CSA 18 funding is supposed to specifically be applied towards our parks. And so there's some confusion, and I'm just hoping that there can be, I've made some phone calls and tried finding out more information, and it's really not clear where certain things are funded, where the funding is coming from for some things. So I'm hoping that that's something that can be investigated a little bit further before any final recommendations are being made or the Board of Supervisors votes on anything, or that your body votes on anything, rather. I think that's all that I wanted to say. I don't know if I should I have just a few seconds left. Nani, would you like me to give a little bit of more background? Nani came to speak regarding the CSA 9 and the medians that are along North San Pedro Road. Because in the draft report, it indicated that there was mention of those medians on North San Pedro Road, and it's just not clear where the funding's actually coming from, but it definitely, we feel, shouldn't be coming from the CSA 18. And so that Nani was going to speak to that. That's all my comments.
And then if you would just bring her the microphone. Yeah. Thank you, Gina.
Good evening. My name is Nani Worl, and I have been involved with the medians probably 17 years. I was president of the SVNA from 81 to probably 89. And at the time, I was not involved with the mediums. And at one point, we met with Clarissa Daniels, who was an administrator for Marin County. And we were told that the county could not take care of those medians, but provide us with rocks. I wasn't involved, and the two people who had some helpers didn't want the rocks. But then they resigned, and I have been working on the medians probably for about 17 years, at least once a month. Sometimes I work by myself. And I was told by Dave Haddam that the first two mediums, the money would come from Northbridge, and that the county would hire a contractor, but that they wouldn't pay for it. And I heard now that the county is paying for it, and we are slaving away on these other mediums, and the only thing we're getting from the county is water. So I would like to know if you can do anything about it for why those two mediums get all the attention, and 7, which basically are 9 for one is 700 feet, takes 3 work days, 3 months to finish it. And I had met with Chris Chamberlain, and he took over and to see if the county could help us, money coming out of CS 18 to provide irrigation, and he said no. And that medium is 700 feet long. So anyway, if the first two mediums get money, the rest should get money too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, last speaker would be Stephen Nessel.
Hi, Stephen Nessel from Marinwood. I have a number of things to say. Let me just start at the beginning. First of all, I really didn't pay attention to the issue until it was brought up here about whatever we are, CSDs. voting on commissioners. And I think you're appointing them now. I think voting is a democratic right, and that's the way it should be, and not decided by a group of insiders. Anyhow, so I did come here tonight to talk about Marinwood CSD and the report. First of all, there were two essential conclusions. First of all, that Marinwood CSD needs better capital planning, which I totally agree. We've got a lot of deferred maintenance. Our pool needs refinishing. We have a decrepit maintenance shed that I've been asking to get fixed for at least, well, as long as I've lived in town, which has been 2006, I guess. And then the merger with the Marinwood Fire Department with another agency or outsourcing for fire protection. I don't believe either one of these observations really goes deep enough. We have an opportunity in Marinwood as a result of our fire chief retiring, Tom Roach. It's really a once-in-a-generation opportunity where we don't have a fire chief, and we're outsourcing it through the city of San Rafael. We need to take an opportunity right now to effect a merger or find other source of fire protection for Marinwood CSD. Currently, we're in a shared service agreement where basically our staff, our fire department is on call in North San Rafael, and it takes up about 70 to 80% of all of our calls. We don't receive income for that. In fact, we actually pay the city of San Rafael for our fire chief, and it really just doesn't make sense at all for the taxpayers of Marinwood to be funding it in this way, especially since, like all other government agencies, we've got the pension issue to deal with. We need to look for ways to streamline. I think a larger agency with more resources makes a whole lot of sense, and I just urge you to maybe put a finer point on that. The second set of issues that I brought up in my comments have to do with operational issues with Marinwood CSD. And
Even if you could wrap up, because you're at the...
okay, so I have written some comments that are actually fairly sharp, basically referring to unethical conduct at the CSD. They're not following contracting laws. There's a lot of problems. There's 2 sets of accounting books, and I would like to urge LAFCO to take a deep dive into the operations of the Marinwood CSD, and if necessary, refer it to a higher authority for follow-up. So I actually am in favor of a fairly aggressive reorganization. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any other comments for the public hearing? Okay. Sure, I'll take it. Okay, Eric.
Good evening. My name is Eric Drykos, and I am the district manager for Marinwood CSD. Thank you to the staff, to the commission, to Plan West. We really appreciated the MSR process, enjoyed going through it, found it quite enlightening, and for the most part, we're very satisfied with it. We did submit a couple of formal comments, which I believe you should have in front of you, one of which is a direct response to Mr. Nestel's comments on behalf of the CSD, which we think kind of clearly and convincingly refutes his allegations and accusations, so we really don't have much more to say about that. With the second letter in regards to the MSR, we actually agree with Mr. Nestel in terms of moving forward with a study for regional fire service delivery. We are fully on board with such a thing and have written a few suggestions in the letter that we provided, and would only encourage, if appropriate, for LAFCO to get involved and ideally take a lead on such a venture. We have already had many conversations with some of the partnering fire agencies in our region. We have a wonderful relationship with the city of San Rafael and their fire department. Our chief officer agreement with them has worked out well. We do share services, we do share personnel. In many ways, we are very much a combined agency as it is. So the more that could be investigated and the sooner that could be investigated, we would certainly be more than willing to cooperate with such a study in any way possible. With that, again, thank you all very much. And by all means, my office is always open. You're more than welcome to come down and take a look at anything you want. I'm happy to show it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to comment during the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. And I'm really happy to see so many people here. This is really gratifying for us that people got the message and really are here to comment. This is exactly what we want. We want as much input as possible before we finalize the draft. All right, any commissioner comments? Commissioner Connolly, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you for the amount of work that went into this. Kind of the scope of this MSR roughly corresponds to my supervisorial district. So as one can well imagine, I've had a particular interest in it. And I guess the process started about a little over a year ago, actually. Keene was still on board. And then, of course, Jason came later. My advice to Keene at that time was carefully learn about the history of the various CSAs and services that are involved in this area. Listen carefully to the community and do outreach. And most importantly, learn about the landmines. Identify them, but do not step on them. So I reiterated that message to Jason, as I think he can attest. And I think the community, sure enough, it has also stepped up and really, again, reiterated that message. Some of these issues are going to involve a broader community discussion. I mean, I've not kind of seen this MSR necessarily as a way to, resolve some of these more controversial issues, i.e. step on the landmine, but more to the point to kind of identify them. And really, I think what we're hearing is we do need some broader discussions. I certainly know, for example, I'll point to the Los Ranchitos situation. We've heard loud and clear. I think the main issue, if I can get to the point, is that the community does not want to be annexed into San Rafael. Message received. So I think the MSR carefully notes that. Now, the broader issue of should Los Ranchitos be in the sphere of influence of San Rafael, I'd like to better understand the implications of that in terms of service delivery, et cetera. In other words, what are unintended consequences if we go down that road? Although I certainly appreciate considerations of community separation, et cetera. Fire services, I think we all recognize countywide the benefit of looking at regional consolidation. So I think you heard that again reiterated tonight, specifically in our neck of the woods. That warrants further study. There's other issues like the boundary of CSA 18. One board member there in particular is pushing the idea of a change there. I think, again, that's going to require a broader community discussion, fully understanding the issues. So I'm not necessarily looking at this as a way to definitively resolve those contentious issues, but rather almost be mindful of not taking a position without fully hearing from the community. Is LAFCO the right forum for that? I don't know. I think maybe it could be part of it, but my sense is there's probably some broader discussions that need to occur on these landmine issues, so to speak. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Connolly. George, I don't know if you want to address Commissioner Connolly's question about what are the implications of having a region in a sphere of influence.
If territory is in a sphere, that is the agency sending the message that at some point in the future, and we don't, there's generally not timelines, but at some point in the future, that jurisdiction, be it a city or a district, intends to serve those parcels and intends to annex. They have an interest in servicing those parcels. That's really what a sphere, that's at its core, the kind of the sphere test.
I actually disagree with that definition of what a sphere is. That there is some debate within LAFCO world, not just, this is outside of just Marin, but within the LAFCO world as to what a sphere really means and does. What George gave is one definition that is followed by some. The definition I tend to follow is that there is an interest of the city of what's going on in that area as well. Because one of the things that a sphere does is anytime the county does work, you know, like you want to build a new building in a sphere, you want to do something different, that the city is made aware of what's going on and has the ability to comment. If it's not in the sphere, then the county technically doesn't need to inform the city that something is going on there. So a sphere is also used as a way to define an area that the city's just, we have an interest in this area. We may actually not really ever look to annex it, but we just have an interest of what's going on there because it impacts what's going on. And in, not to try and step on landmines, but you used the Los Ranchitos example, that actually is 100% surrounded by the city. I know that there is a section of the city that is in an open space district, but when you look at the underlying map, it is part of that land is actually in the city of San Rafael's city boundaries. So it is a completely surrounded, and for me, a sphere for completely surrounded, for an area that is completely surrounded should always be in the sphere. There's no reason why the city wouldn't want to have it, or if there is, they should have a really good reason why it's not part of their area.
And in your view, that does not necessarily mean inevitably that there would be an annexation process
Correct.
At some point.
And is that something that we might want to put, memorialize in a policy in our handbook, what that means?
We definitely could fine tune what's in our policy handbook around that if you so desire.
So that it doesn't, to use more of your definition.
Correct.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I'm committed to supporting the community in their view that it should not be annexed. So whatever facilitates that is the right direction. Again, the broader issue of how services are delivered, community separation, et cetera, sounds like a broader discussion, but.
Okay. Other comments? Vice Chair Murray?
And can I add?
Yes.
The city of San Rafael has fully made it clear that they do not intend to pursue annexation as well.
So I think we heard a lot of comments tonight on the CSAs and needing clarity. What areas they serve, what are their powers, perhaps reviewing their latent powers, what are their funding sources, and maybe even a look at funding sources that they need for other than water and things like this. So I think this document could help the communities in that part. And then I'm curious too, you know, some of these larger regional reviews, fire districts, parks and rec, road and lighting, dredging services. So on parks and rec, we have private delivery folks, for instance, like the Cuneo Pool in Terra Linda. group of Cal grads and Olympians are going to create a high-quality facility. So we may want to look at private facilities too, and I don't think we've really kind of done that in the past. On fire delivery services, we have Lucas providing fire services. I know when I was in Terra Linda, we had Marinwood coming over to an accident on Monticello just up from Kaiser Hospital. So it did strike me a little odd that we had a fire department just a block down on Del Ganado, but we had Marinwood servicing us. So, you know, I don't know if that's service, getting in the service calls and where they're from and who's responding, that sort of detail. And perhaps, as Damon mentioned, those might be offline and more detailed reviews and kind of gearing up for the next MSR in terms of detail that's needed to make these important decisions. But it seems like there's been a little functional consolidation going on, hearing from our Marinwood general manager on sharing a fire chief and services, which is nice to hear, good to hear. So it's kind of moving that direction. And then on the roads and street lighting too, really need to look at those pockets that are underserved, seeing how we could help. Perhaps, George, you can indicate other areas that have looked at districts or funding or ways to create more of a standard level of service. And then the dredging service in Santa Fe seems to be a constant need. And this is kind of working with the feds, and there seems to be larger commercially driven areas that take precedence regionally. So how Santa Fe could compete. So George, with your experience bringing things to this community, sharing that within the MSR, I think that's definitely value added that could help improve those conditions.
Craig, just to clarify what you meant by underserved pockets.
It might be a level of street lighting, little to no street lighting. There's a perception of safety sometimes with the street lighting. It might be our archaic lighting systems, non-LED. Perhaps there's not infrastructure, either an organized political body that could help support that, or just an assessment of those areas that are in need of that.
Any other comments? I just had a couple of small general things since we're using your MSR here as a template for the future. Actually, one specific, so San Rafael is is doing their general plan effort right now, right? Yep. So since they're in the process, were they able to give you information that's more current than the 2020 plan? I know the 2020 general plan was referenced throughout the document.
As you know, there's land use figures in the MSR. We add those because while you don't have land use authority, it really shows the range of uses. Because yes, we did have specific conversations with city staff. We heard and were very encouraged by the general plan update process in play. And but because these are snapshots in time, we had to go with the existing land use on the books. But they did share with us how they're broadening out some of their policy. And I think now we've had a little bit of time while we're going through this review, and I feel it'd be worth checking in with them to see, you know, how their thinking has moved along, and if there's things relevant to putting into the final, we'll certainly do so.
Yeah, certainly if there are any significant changes from the previous, we'd want to forecast that as much as was possible.
Yeah, we will reach out again to the city planners and see how where they're currently at.
And then just a couple other comments. I think you have a transparency section, which is great. I'd love to have you include which agencies televise their meetings. I know City of San Rafael does. I don't know if all the other agencies do, but that is something that is becoming increasingly important in nowadays. And it would be maybe nice to have a table that has here, all the agencies here, when their meetings are, location, and whether they're televised. And some of them stream them online, and that would be really convenient for people to see. And then did you look at all at pension and OPEB issues related to financial sustainability?
Say that again?
Pension and OPEB issues related to the financial stability. And that's a whole, I know you could do a whole deep dive in that, but is there a way that you can make reference to that in the financial sustagenability? I know San Rafael has some issues in that area.
Reference. It's just, it's pretty pervasive, and agencies are suffering under the pension, especially the unfunded liability obligation. So, yep, good point. We should probably give that a little more.
Would be great to just, each agency has their, their actuarial report, which has what their, liability is. It'd be great to kind of just have that figure in there, since you have, since you have at a high level, kind of what all the other figures are.
Happy to do that. Some of the longest pauses I get are when I ask them, "What's your unfunded liability? Are you still there?"
Right.
But yeah, the question needs to be asked. It's one that agencies are struggling with, and
for both pensions and OPEBs, which would be great. And then I think Jason is actually kind of working on this, but I'd love to see at the end sort of a punch list of all the things that LAFCO is going to be looking at, and that other agencies. The grand jury does things like that, where they kind of ask for responses. We have a former grand jury person in the audience here. And I know we don't ask for responses per se, but it'd be good as a reference when we go back to it to go, what were we supposed to be following up on? Yep, I knew you were working on that.
And it'll be a checklist, so we can go back and look at it, where are we at, what are we doing, kind of beat me to what's following all this.
Oh, sorry about that, didn't mean to steal your thunder.
But yes, that'll be part of what we're doing with this MSR.
Okay, great. And then just, in your section 2.2, you have kind of a generic list of all the documents you used. It would be great if you could give an appendix of all the documents you did access with links to them, so that people could, if people want to go deeper on any of that they could. That would be really great.
We'll add the links in an appendix. Yes.
Okay, great. Any other comments? And then Jason, you had some follow-up.
Sure. So what's going to follow up from this is right now, George and Plan West have been working on our Novato MSR, which is almost complete and done for the public draft. We hope to have that out by the end of this month, or at the very, very latest, the very first week of September. So what they're going to do is continue to focus on the Novato MSR first. Let's get that out for public comment. And then after they're done with that, we will then sit down and review all the public comments, all the comments that were made here tonight, anything else that we may get, and really then dive into and figure out how quickly we can get a final draft turned around. My hope and goal is to try and do it by October, but that might be a little wishful thinking, because especially based on some of the comments that were made here tonight, some new things that you were looking for, that might take them a little bit more time to research and get in there correctly. So we may not meet the October meeting, but instead do it at the meeting after that. So that is what the goal is for getting this MSR to what I call its final stage. And as Sashi already had me bring up, we will have a one-page checklist of all the things that we are looking to do out of this. And some of them, the MSR is, to go to Commissioner Connolly's comment, we were not looking to blow anything up with this MSR, but rather to tee things up so I can step on some lines later. And so, like, one of the things that I can tell you right now I'm already looking to have, it's already on my list to do, is create a working group for the fire issues in the San Rafael area, so we can bring all those people together and sit down and figure it out. One thing to keep in mind on that, Larkspur and Corte Madera, if I'm not mistaken, recently did a merger of their two fire systems, and that took them 2 years to do. And that was mainly due to the retirement OPEB pension issues, and they had it easy. They were both in CalPERS. Here we are talking about being in CalPERS and MSERA, which adds an extra layer of difficulty in figuring out how to do it correctly. So I don't want anyone to think that, hey, we're going to start working on this and the answer is going to come overnight. No, it's probably going to be a bit of time. That's going to be, in all likelihood, potentially a multi-year project to really come together. But my goal is to start working towards it and figure out how we resolve that issue.
Yeah, and they really did break some new ground on that. So they hopefully paved the way a little bit, but
Yes.
you're right, it is much more complex. And you're also bringing up another function of LAFCO that is not necessarily named, which is to be a neutral convener of these kind of conversations so that we can get all the parties together on neutral ground. So thank you for that, Jason. So that is it. That's it for the first draft of the MSR, and then we will please continue to reach out to. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to, it might be good to take a quick 5-minute break just to give people a chance to stretch their legs, and we do have food finally did arrive, so people can
Okay,
grab that
great.
if they want to.
All right, we'll take a little break, and then we'll move on to item 7. All right, we will come back to order here, and we are on item 7. Is that correct? Jason?
So item 7 is a time extension for an application that's been sitting in front of us for a while. The commission already approved the application on a condition that they get a permit from the county's coastal permit department. I'm drawing a blank on the exact name of it, but there's a coastal permit process. Thank you. From them. They just last week, I believe it was, submitted the application. They finally worked everything out with the staff for that commission, for that group. And submitted the application, so they need a little bit more time for it to physically go through their process now. But I would expect, since they've submitted it, officially submitted it, that everything's been worked out, and it should be coming, they should be finishing it up. And once it's finished up, it'll come back to us. But since government code actually states that we can only you have 1 year to resolve it, or you have to come back and ask for an extension. They haven't resolved it, so they're now coming back and asking for an extension. So it's in front of you today. If you have any questions, happy to answer it.
Any questions from the commission? Vice Chair Murray?
Just a general question. So I think we talked about this before. How many extensions can we grant before?
We can grant them 1 million extensions if we really wanted to. There's a fee that goes with it, so they pay the fee. Now, if the commission doesn't want to grant the extension, they have the right to do so.
I move we
Oh, hold on. Sorry, 1 second. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. And go ahead, Judy.
approve the extension.
I'll second.
Oh, moved and seconded by one of these two gentlemen here. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Motion carries.
Okay. And now where are we?
Item 8, item 8.
Item 8, okay.
So item 8 is a new application to annex 2260 Vineyard Road into the Novato Sanitary District. If you look up on the screen, you will see a nice map with a red, or I'm sorry, not a white spot in the middle of it. That is the only spot, as you can see, there's a couple spots on the very edge that are not in the sanitary district right now. This is a home that is on septic. They're looking to eventually switch over to sanitary district. It's in the city of Novato. And so no one is objecting to it. This one was a slightly odd application, and we did a little thing a little bit out of order in that the city of Novato is actually in the process of repaving that road, and we would not get through our process before the road got repaved. And the city of Novato informed everyone on the road, if you want to do anything that goes under the road, do it now, or you're not doing it for the next 6 to 10 years, something of that nature. So they went through the process, and I granted, and Novato Sanitary was also okay with doing this, of putting in, there's something that you put from the street to the property line so that they don't have to dig up the street in the future. And then once our process is over, they will then go through the process of, doing the connections and all those other things that they want to do. But they've kind of already done part of it. So that's the process at this point.
Okay.
In honor of City of Novato's very nice Heritage Days I attended this weekend, this sounds like a great one to approve.
Okay, any other questions?
I move the item.
Okay, any public comment? Seeing none, close public comment. Okay, moved by Commissioner Murray, seconded by Commissioner Arnold. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. So in the first section of that sentence of that resolution, it should say located at.
Okay. We will make amendment to that.
Okay.
Next item is 10.
Yeah, okay, Cal LAFCO conference.
So Cal LAFCO has its annual conference that we traditionally attend. There are a few items that are in front of you today around the Cal LAFCO conference. One is this is the time of the year when we do our nominations if we wish to nominate ourselves. I will be very blunt. I don't think this is the right year to nominate us. I personally think that next year we will be in extremely good shape to go after what I consider the big award, the LAFCO of the year, because we will have completed San Rafael, Novato. Jaron will have hopefully completed 2 more MSRs by the time we apply for that process, and we will have started 2 more groups of MS. I mean, we will be in an amazing shape to really go after LAFCO of the year. I don't think this is the year to do it. So if we want to nominate, you're welcome to do so. I will happily help fill out any applications that are needed. The other item is the election of their board of directors. There are 2 seats, every cycle there are 2 seats that are up. This cycle is the city and the public seat. The public seat member is not going to run for re-election, but I do know that there are other members of the coastal region, which is the region we are in, that have public members that have already said they're looking to run. So this is the time, if the board wishes to nominate someone, they can. I will throw in a small little plug. I know Commissioner Murray for a few times has tried to get onto the Cal LAFCO board. The current cycle of the seat that he would be applying for comes up next year, and the person who is in that seat will be finishing up their term on the executive board of the board of directors, which normally indicates that person will be leaving and it will become an open seat. If we nominate and win somebody this time, it'll be extremely difficult for him to win next time, because there's no way that out of 13 LAFCOs they're going to give 2 seats, because there's 4 seats in total, 2 of them to the same LAFCO. So if anyone's interested, I don't want to discourage anyone from running, but I do know Commissioner Murray's interest in the past, and so just wanted to put that out there.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't nominate anyone now, so we can give Craig the best chance later.
Correct.
So Jason, thanks for the clarification, but respect to Chris Gelton, he ran very well, first time out as our public member in our coastal commission, and one person he lost to was the Santa Clara rep who's stepping down. So do hope Chris considers to run in the future too. He performed very well for Marin.
Thank you, Craig.
And then just the last little bit, which is in the memo, just so there's full public disclosure there. The hotel in which this conference is being held at is boycotted by the Hotel Workers Union. Staff has made a decision that they will not be attending this conference. If any commissioner wishes to attend, please let me know so we can get the proper paperwork in. I have heard already that they have all the rooms have been booked for the conference, but I think that is more some LAFCOs, as soon as the rooms become available, they take a huge block, and then once they figure out who's going, they shrink their block down, so there probably will eventually be rooms available at the hotel, but for now, from what I understand, all the rooms have been booked.
And the second day is on Halloween, which is just not not very helpful for those of us who have families. But
So I want to thank Jason for bringing that item forward too. I personally am not into union busting, and I think this is very overt in terms of doing that. I think we still could participate and show our strength of Marin in our statewide organization, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we could still vote and participate basically in proxy, even though not being there. Is that correct?
Yes, so there is a proxy process. What I would end up doing is if no commissioner said they were going, especially if no commissioner was going to go because of Halloween, some commissioner may go one day but not another day because of how things work, and we're close enough where you can drive up for a day if you wanted to. If no commissioner was going to be there on the day when they do the election of commissioners or of the board and some of the other procedural stuff where we vote, we do have the ability to vote by proxy, and I would be taking that to our next meeting and having a discussion about who do we want to vote for the board member seats. And we could have that discussion at the commission meeting and then approve that, and then I would send in the proxy form based on that election here.
so any commissioners who are interested in attending should just reach out to you. And,
Yes.
Yep.
So Sashi, I think it's wise, Chase, as presented, to kind of keep our powder dry, so to speak, and really gear up for next year. And this one is in Sacramento, so it would be easy for anyone to participate. Do you know where next year's conference will be?
Sorry, off the top of my head, I don't. I know it's out there, and I can get it out to the commissioners just so
Do
you're
they
aware.
usually do Southern California, Northern California?
Yeah, I think they normally do a rotation, but it's a rotation between the 4 regions. So last one was in Yosemite, so that region was covered. So I'm assuming it's going to be south somewhere. I just don't know if it's the southern region or the region between us. Yeah, Central Valley might be another one that could get it too, so not really sure which one's getting it next time.
Okay.
So it might be Fresno or something like that.
So does anyone have any comments on putting any projects up or putting us in for any awards? It sounds like we're generally in agreement to go with Jason's thoughts of going out for the next year. Yep, okay. All right. Nothing to vote on there, okay? All right. Policy and Personnel Committee update.
Sure. Earlier in the agenda under the consent calendar, or what was pulled from the consent calendar, we had a discussion about the policy handbook. The Personnel and Policy Committee is also working on the personnel policy as well. That's a much more detailed, complex thing. The committee has met, and I will yield to the chair if she wants to make any comments about it, but we are still in process of creating that personnel policy at this time.
I will say that it has been really great having both Commissioner Connolly and Commissioner Bailey as two attorneys on this, because they've really dug into these policies, and I think that having their expert knowledge has been very useful for the commission, so thank you very much to the two of you. And I think it might be too late for me to make this comment, but since we're in this committee, Commissioner Skelton did submit comments on the policy handbook. I apologize that I did not bring those up at the time, but tell me if this is a time to bring this up. But one of the questions he had was about whether or not the alternate and the public member should be replaced in the same cycle, and his concern was about potential loss of institutional knowledge if they go at the same time, and that staggering might be helpful. So that just was a comment that he made that maybe we'd want to entertain in the future.
So is this time to ask questions about the duck subcommittee?
That is, yeah, the next.
Once we get to the next item.
Yep. Yep, okay. Next item is the DUC committee, the ad hoc disadvantaged.
I will yield to the chair first if he wishes to make any comments. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it over to Jaron to talk about what came out of the committee.
So, Board Commissioners, in your packet, there's a memo to all regarding our committee work, and I did thank our fully staffed 3 members, performing quite well. And actually, our new policy analyst, Jason, kind of carried the ball, so we really appreciate that in terms of deep dives. And also looking at kind of the weakness of Marin and our lack of detail to really come to policy formations on ducks within Marin. So we determined, this is Commissioner Skelton, Rodoni, and myself, that after 2 meetings that there is a potential in Marin City. We had some other locations that could be considered ducks, but until the U.S. Census data is better and we have better metric, we won't go forward. And the whole genesis of this was SB 244 WOLC that was approved in 2011, and they basically had 3 criteria that we're looking at. One was containing 10 or more dwelling units in close proximity to one another. The other item is either within a city sphere of influence, an island with a city boundary, or geographically isolated has existed for more than 50 years. And then lastly, on income, has a median household income of 80% or less than the state household income. So we're looking at this MHI. Couple of documents we did look at is the county's unincorporated area-wide plans. They're quite out of date. That's in my memo to y'all. There's some really good ones. There's some that are from the 70s, early 80s that really need to be updated. And those could help LAFCO in the future. One, the housing element to provide more data. And then these deep dives in these unincorporated areas, such as county area-wide reviews or plans, be updated. It sounded like from Dennis, our county supervisor on the committee, there's priorities and obvious based on the date and age of these things that they need to be pushed up a little bit. With that, we're requesting the board's consideration to basically close the committee. That's what we're recommending. Thanks, Dave.
Jaron?
Well, Commissioner Murray did a wonderful summation of just about everything that we covered. We met for the second time on the 22nd. the biggest takeaway from the first meeting that we had prior to that was a desire to have a better understanding of where the county sat on disadvantaged unincorporated communities. So staff went and met with Laylee Thomas. She's the housing and planning manager for the county. She pointed out to staff that the current county housing element does not recognize any disadvantaged unincorporated communities at this time. One of the things that the committee was looking at was the possibility of some smaller communities being missed because of the level that the data was being pulled at. She, meaning Laylee, and one of her researchers made it clear that the county pulls all of its data at the tract level, simply because as you get smaller, the margin for error apparently gets exponentially greater. So while it is a possibility that some smaller pockets are being missed because of the level that the data is being pulled at the same stroke, it's possible that you end up creating a pocket that may not actually be there by the error that can be involved. Ultimately, staff's position is that if we hold off until 2020 census data is available, it also gives us the opportunity to be collaborative with the county as they'll be moving into creating their new housing element at that time, and to try to come together and create not only a definition, but a working collaboration of how we are pulling the data, if we're going to do it together, so we can be essentially reading the same book together.
And the census data will be released in April of 2020, so it's not that far away.
Right.
Yeah.
The one thing I will add is there's a small discrepancy in the state government code of how LAFCO looks at what a duck is and how the county looks at what a duck is. So by LAFCO definitions, there is actually a duck. It's in Marin City, and we still do recognize that. It's just if you use the county system of what they're required to look at, it doesn't exist. So the state legislature, I think, should probably do something to like say, hey, everybody should be looking at the same definition and not have one definition in one place and a different definition in another place.
Yes. Vice Chairman.
So one other probably more very important thing besides just the Senate bill requesting us to go through this process is funding available for ducks. And we're looking at maps, and majority of the Central Valley in Southern California, just areas of red, areas of kind of predetermined that they're ducks. So in Marin, we have small pockets. And De Leon had a bill that a minimum of 25% of the cap and trade funds flow to ducks. So the future and the funding of these areas are important. So if we do have areas in need in Marin of services or a lack of quality improvements, then I think a goal of LAFCO is really to reach out, try to do that, analyzing that, qualifying at a state level, and also receive funds outside of Marin, such as cap and trade funds that could help those locations.
I did, and I apologize for kind of jumping ahead a minute ago. Historically, I had always heard and been told that Alto in Mill Valley was a duck. And yet I don't see it mentioned in here, and I don't hear you talking about it. So is that because of the county definition versus state definition, or was that always a bogus indication?
I think it gets down to what level of information you go and what what the state requires you to look at for your definition. Based on what LAFCO looks at, Alto doesn't qualify. Is there probably a low-income community within there? Probably, sure, but it's probably small, and because of what's around it and what gets put into its same census block or track or whatever, that it gets outweighed by what's the expensiveness of next to it.
So just to carry that one more step, the reason it became an issue is that there was a bill a couple of years ago where the adjoining city to a duck, under certain circumstances, would have to annex the duck.
Yep.
And so if there were things like whatever the triggers were that the city of Mill Valley was going to do, then Alto would need to be annexed. And what you're saying is that by whatever the definition for that usage is, that Alto doesn't qualify as a duck, so that wouldn't be a consideration for Mill Valley. True?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Thanks.
Yeah, I heard that too. I think it's not true anymore if it was.
If I could add one more thing.
Yes, please, Jerry.
There was one thing that did come out of both meetings was a consensus between both the committee and staff that while perhaps the data that's being pulled right now doesn't designate certain areas to qualify as a duck, that as we move through these MSRs in different regions throughout the county, that staff would make sure that we have a genuine intention of taking a deeper look into areas that even possibly anecdotally have been kind of designated as lower income. We would take a harder look at those areas to ensure that basic service needs are being met, even if they aren't receiving that designation.
Good. We'll move on to item 13.
Actually, we have two things to approve. One, under 12A is to approve the duck policy as presented by the committee, and under 12B is to disband the ad hoc duck committee.
Okay. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. So that was for both.
Yeah.
You okay with that?
I'm
Okay.
fine with that.
All right. The catch on that. All right. So now we will move on to item 13.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is before you because the county does our payroll and they require an even hourly rate. So if you might recall back in June, you approved an amendment to the executive officer's employment agreement. It didn't result in an even hourly rate. So what we're asking you to consider is an amendment to the contract. It would increase the salary by $9.60. But it would result in an even hourly rate and would allow for payroll to continue. And it would be effective retroactively back to July 1. And that figure is the closest amount to the amount that you previously approved.
Any questions?
$36.
No, it's
It's $9.60 over the entirety of the year.
Just make sure you make it worth it to us.
I think the public comment during was good to me, so I think I've earned that 960.
All right, any questions? Okay, any public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do we have a motion?
I'll move this.
Yes, second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries.
Congratulations for the raise.
Thank you.
Don't spend it all in one place.
I think we ate it back there. It's traditional that when you get a raise, you buy everybody drinks.
Sure. I think there's some water in the
Some
kitchen.
water back there, yeah. All right, Jason, Executive Officer report.
Sure. Under here, I'll run through these really quickly, so kind of raise your hand if you want me to stop on one of them. The first one is your budget update. It just gives you where we're at with the budget process. We are in that weird, what I always call the weird meeting, where we are finishing one fiscal year and starting a new one. And we're even a little bit weirder this time because we've changed, if you might remember, our line items and how we do that. So when you look at, you'll see two different reports almost in there. One of them is the old way of how we did it, and the new one is the new way since we just started a new fiscal year. So it will give you a good understanding of what the changes were that I made to the budgeting process. A lot of the line items were rolled up together. This doesn't mean that all of them disappeared. If you ever wanted to come and say, Jason, what are we actually spending on all the different benefit line items? I still have the ability to pull that up and show it to you. It's just not showing up in the big picture budget that you see, because for me, it's benefits. It really shouldn't matter which one it is from a high level perspective. So moving on then to current and pending proposals. We've dealt with actually 3 different current and pending proposals in the application process. I am expecting that we probably in the near future will start to see a few more applications come in. People heard that we seem to lower our fee schedule. That doesn't actually kick in for another week. So I imagine that after that kicks in, we might see 1 or 2 new applications come in as people are waiting for that new process to start. But we're moving through. I think we're pretty much done with all of the applications except for now one of them, and one that we just extended today that are left over from prior to me being here. So I've really worked our way through getting those done. Update on the MSRs. You heard the MSRs that we're working on already, San Rafael and Novato, but we have already started our next 2, which is East Peninsula, which is the first one of the 2 that we're focusing on, and that one's moving through the process. Jaron and I have met with everyone with those districts and he's doing the research. He's going to be getting me a draft in the next day or 2, I understand, for the first one to look at and see where we're at with that. So we're starting to move those through the process. The next group that will come after he's done doing this group is going to be the Ross Valley area study. So that will be the next group that comes into play. Did you have a question?
So are we using kind of the template that George
Yes.
has laid out? Okay.
Yeah, we're using a similar template. In addition to those two, we're also, you might remember at the last meeting, we decided to break up the flood control zones. And so Candace and I, after we got through this meeting next week, we'll start working on getting those done because Jaren's busy enough. So the two of us are going to tackle the flood control zones for San Rafael and the Vado areas. And we should have some fun stuff coming out of there. Try not to step on any landmines while we're doing it. Moving on then to correspondence, there's a letter that you got. We attended a staff workshop, a Cal LAFCO workshop. They sent us a thank you letter for attending. And then the last item I had on my list was strategic plan workshop. Last one we did was a 1.5-year plan, and come January, we should potentially be planning our next one. So I wanted to check in and say, do we want to do another workshop in January? Because that would be when we would traditionally have our next workshop done, because that will help us set up what we're doing for the following fiscal year.
So we're already to the 1.5 years, huh?
Yep. I mean, we're not to the 1.5 years of what the plan was, but we're to a 1.5 years to where we need to have the next workshop so we can go beyond the 1.5 years.
Yeah. I'd say let's get back on the regular schedule again.
Okay. And the other question I had is some places will do planning workshops not every year, but every other year. Do we want to do a 2-year workshop or a 1-year workshop? Would kind of be the other big picture question I would have at this point.
I wonder whether now that we're kind of rolling, maybe we want to do a 2-year. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts at the moment.
Something to think about. We don't have to make a decision today. It's one of those things I wanted to put out there to have your.
When we're missing some people, maybe we
yeah.
would have some.
We'll have more discussion as we get closer to it. So what I'm going to do is, I'm assuming we want to use Bill again, who's done our previous workshops.
Yeah.
I'll reach out to him, find out what some times are available for him. Candace will then reach out to all of you and figure out if there's some time. Hopefully in January is what I'm looking towards, and see if we can find a date to do a workshop. And we'll start that ball rolling now so we can get ahead of the game, because I know some of you have calendars that schedule out 2 or 3 months, and I want to get ahead of that schedule.
And the venue as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that is all I have for my executive officer's report.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Jason, on just the rollback on the proposals, 15-1 Lucas Valley Road. It seems like that's been going on a long time, a couple years, just waiting on MMWD to do a will serve. Is that still what's holding this up?
From what I understand, I don't know if I'd characterize it exactly the same way as you. There is the district and the applicant need to come to terms. A couple of times it sounded like they had come to terms, and then when final documents were being looked at by both lawyers, one lawyer balked at it. And I don't want to say it was the same side each time. I think both sides have balked at it a little bit, and they're continuing to try and figure out how to put the final T and dot the final I on it. And that one will come up in December on its anniversary. So if they haven't done something by then, part of me almost says that would be one where I might honestly say either figure it out or it's not going to happen. Let's just kill this thing at that point.
Yeah, I think we mentioned before it'd be nice, because I'm not sure if this is really on folks' timeline, but maybe 60 or 90 days out to let them know, hey, your application's coming due and it will expire. So that it kind of prompts them to, particularly if folks need to start scheduling meetings and get things back to us.
Yeah, I do check in actually occasionally even before then. Like I've checked in a couple of times since the last time just to see what's the status of it. I will do my official hey, this is a warning check-in will occur normally the week after the meeting, then our next meeting, because our October meeting, and then it'll have to come up in December. Although I do need to look at the calendar to make sure that our December meeting is actually not a year and a day or one of those types of things where they actually have to get approval on October. So I'll be checking the calendar on that, just double checking everything. So I already do that type of activity.
And lastly, I just want to thank you and staff, whoever's working on this, to have this nice, clean schedule, and everyone in the public can see this. And very detailed, and you can clearly see the applications that are being worked on.
Yeah.
And the staff's work, so thank you.
Thank you. That took a lot of work to put together. And one of the things I will be doing is this will be the last meeting where you'll see a bunch of completeds at the end, because we just finished a fiscal year. Those completeds will fall off the chart that you see, and any new completeds will just be stuff that's completed during the current fiscal year.
Great. And I think you heard from a lot of people in the audience today that, Jason, that it was a pleasure to work with you, that you were very responsive. So want to thank you for doing great work there, and Candace and Jaron as well for really having our first big MSR with the new team go very well. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that comment. I just hope they continue those comments after, respond back to some of them that we can't do what they want.
Right. Well, I think they all definitely feel listened to, which is really what's important. All right, any commissioner announcements or requests? Okay, hearing none, then we will adjourn to the next meeting on Thursday, October 10th, 2019 at 7 p.m.